Hello students, welcome to the Pole Science of Class 11 Arts, and today we will proceed with the fifth new topic introduced by the CBSE in this year's Pole Science syllabus of Class 11 Arts, and this new topic that is included is human rights, and the topic human rights is from the chapter Rights. So let us proceed then. So about human rights are those rights which all human beings are entitled by virtue of being human. That means, in simple words, if we talk about rights, that may be fundamental rights also, that may be other rights also. But if we talk about human rights in simple words, if you want to understand, we can define human rights as the rights that is given to human being. That means any person born as human in this earth are entitled to be given human rights. It is based on the principle of respect for the individual. That means the human rights, if it is being entitled or is being given to every human being living in this earth, so it is based on what? On the principle of respect for the individual. That means each individual should respect the other, and in this way that process should move on. The fundamental assumption behind the concept of human rights is that every person is a moral and rational being who deserves to be treated with dignity. That means if the human rights works with the principle of giving respect to one another, that means what? That means every human being born in this earth is to be given or is to be treated with dignity, no matter, irrespective of their caste, creed or gender. That particular human being, every human being living in this earth or born in this earth should be treated with dignity. Human rights are both universal and fundamental. These are universal in the sense that they belong to all human beings, irrespective of race, nationality, community, religion, gender, etc. And these are also fundamental because once given, this cannot be taken back. So, apart from giving respect, apart from giving dignity or treating human being with dignity, human rights has two sides. Human rights, first, is the universal concept, and second, that it is fundamental concept also. So how can we treat or say human rights as fundamental, universal concept? Because universally, if we are born as a human being, then that human right should be given to us, rights belonging to us, irrespective of race, nationality, community. That does not matter if you are a male or a female, if you are a black or a white, if you are belonging to some other religion or not, but that human rights is universal in nature. And it has the second side that tells that human rights are fundamental in nature, because if fundamental as human rights, if we see that as a fundamental rights or fundamental basic rights, that means it has to be given once we are born as a human being, and that right cannot be taken back from us. Clear? Although the presence of human rights can be traced to the ancient Indian philosophy and the culture, the concept formally originated at the international level in 1948 with the UNDHR. That means United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, listing 30 rights for all people across the globe. That means at last, if we want to trace down its history, meaning to say that if we want to trace through the history that when the human rights was actually entitled to us globally, so that was done in the year 1948 through the UNDHR, that means the United Nations Declarations of Human Rights. Through that very particular Declaration of Human Rights, the United Nations in the year 1948 actually declared and listed that 30 rights should be given to people all across the globe. That means wherever the people are born, if we, you and anyone who is born as a human being in any part of the world, that particular human being should be at least given a minimum of 30 rights that has been allotted through the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. Clear? So that was done. If we want to trace the history, that particular time in 1948, the UNDHR actually listed 30 rights for all people across the globe. This was the first and foremost thing that was done globally for the sake of human rights. Clear? So now related to it, one short question is there, that when did the concept of human rights originate? So it's very easy, as we have discussed just now, that the concept of human rights formally originated at the international level. That means across the globe. It was not for a particular country like India or the United States of America, but the United Nations, through its declaration, which was known as the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, actually listed 30 rights for all people across the globe. Across the globe means all over the world. So the concept of human rights formally originated at the international level in the year 1948. Remember this date and year, with the UN Declaration of Human Rights, which is also known as UNDHR, listed 30 rights for all people across the globe. After that comes, what are human rights? This type of questions may vary across 4 or 5 marks each. So when you see this type of questions, you should actually elaborate writing these answers. So let us read the answer. So what are human rights? Human rights refer to those rights which all human beings are entitled by virtue of being human. That means if we are born as a human, we should be given human rights. It is based on the principle of respect for the individual. That means first and foremost is the respect that should be given to the individual as a part of human rights. Secondly, the fundamental assumption behind the concept of human rights is that every person is a moral and rational being who deserves to be treated with dignity. That means if we are born as a human being, we should be given respect because for the fact that every individual has a moral and rational, or is a moral or rational, and that particular individual, along with respect, also wants dignity to live in this society. Human rights are both universal and fundamental. On the other hand, human rights can be coined as what? Both universal factor also and fundamental also. Universal in the sense that they belong to all human beings. That means when human rights are given to human beings, the issues like which race or which nationality or community, religion or gender he or she belongs, that is not seen, that is ignored. And fundamental in the sense that if we are born as a human being at any part of the world, that means that fundamental, that basic thing like human rights is given to us, and that cannot be taken back. So although the presence of human rights can be traced to the ancient Indian philosophy and culture, that means if we try to trace out that the human rights or many welfare programs related to human rights started way back during the ancient Indian philosophy. But if we want to trace it in the global ways, then we can say that it was done for the first time globally in the year 1948 by the United Nations, and that was done through the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, where 30, that means a minimum of 30 rights were listed, and this 30 rights was approved to be given to every individual across the globe. That means a person who is born as a human being should be at least given 30 minimum rights, no matter where he or she is born. In any part of the globe, if he or she is born, that particular 30 rights should be given to that human beings across the globe. So with this, I will wind up today's topic based on the new topic. This is the 5th new topic being introduced by the CBSE, and this topic was human rights, where we read about what do we mean by human rights and what are its areas. After that, we also read about why human rights can be called as universal and fundamental. These are very important points. Please go through once more. And we also read about globally, for the first time, the United Nations actually started human rights all across the globe through the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, and they listed 30 rights for all people across the globe. And after that, we discussed about one short question and answer related to the concept of human rights when it was originated, and after that we discussed about what are human rights. Explain. So I would like to conclude the topic here only. Thank you.